Hi, Rob.
Hey, Conn.
How is everything over at the Heritage Foundation today?
Oh, things are pretty busy. You know, we have had immigration on our plate for the last 3 weeks. So,
are you guys all throwing back tequila and lime juice after the end of the immigration bill?
Actually, hardly. You know, the president came out with a radio address today, and the White House is putting out more talking points saying that they're moving ahead. So we're not missing a beat. We're right on top of this and expect to spend the next week or two continuing to have a back and forth on the bill. And
well, before we dive into immigration, then let me first get you to tell everyone at Blogging Heads TV who you are, what your function is at Heritage, and a little brief history of the phenomenon that is Rob Bluey.
Well, who am I? Well, I've held a couple jobs reporting in Washington. I was at Cybercast News Service to start off with, covered the 2004 election while I was there. After that, I moved up to Capitol Hill here, worked for Human Events, where I edited the website, started a blog, the first blog on Human Events.
The Right Angle, right?
The Right Angle, exactly. And then just since February, I've been over here at the Heritage Foundation, where I'm the director of the Center for Media and Public Policy, and that's a fancy way of saying that I'm the Heritage blogger. I post on my own site, robertbluey.com, and I also blog on Redstate. I'm a contributor over there.
So, but Heritage doesn't have their own blog.
Well, we have a policy blog. We actually have a few kind of niche blogs. There's like a national security blog. But no, in terms of having a blog on par with, say, like the Cato Institute, we don't have something that's a place where every policy analyst would go to publish.
So you do most of your Heritage voicing projection through Redstate in your own personal blog, then?
Exactly. And I work in the communications and marketing department over here at Heritage. So, just like my next door office mate, Chris Brooks, she's booking people on TV, and Jim Weidman is placing editorials and or op-eds in newspapers. I'm the guy who they go to get the message out through the blogosphere.
Cool. So moving then back to immigration, as far as message goes, what is the Heritage Foundation case against first this past Senate immigration bill, and then more largely the White House effort?
Well, I mean, the biggest concern that we have about the bill is that it grants amnesty to 12 million or more illegal aliens. And I know that's a point the White House has been trying to rebut for the last 3 weeks, I guess largely unsuccessful given the vote that took place yesterday. But, without securing the border first, we're really concerned about some of the other provisions in the bill.
Now, can I stop you there?
Absolutely.
As far as, it seems to me securing the border is a separate issue from what you do with the 12 million here in this country. So if we could focus on the 12 million, is there anything at all the government could do for those 12 million that would legalize them or grant them citizenship that Heritage would not call amnesty?
Well, I know you don't. I know you don't want to combine the two issues, but I mean, I think that you definitely have to look at the border security as part of. If the president's going to talk about a comprehensive plan, we have to talk about it. So, I mean, not to ignore what you're trying to say, but is there a way? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a way. I mean, the Heritage Foundations would certainly be interested in talking about ideas on how to deal with the people who are already here and a way to
So I guess what I'm hearing then is that you're open to doing something along the lines of legalization and or citizenship down the road for the 12 million that are here, but you're not going to do any of that until you get security of the border first.
Right. I mean, we don't want to repeat what happened in 1986.
And tell everyone what happened in 1986.
Well, exactly. Our hero, the conservative Ronald Reagan, and Ed Meese, who now works over at Heritage, they were in the midst of
and Ed Meese, who lived through this before, is against the bill, of course.
Yeah, Ed Meese, who like you say, did live through this before. He's come out, very strongly against the bill. He was Attorney General in the Reagan administration. He saw what happened in 1986 when they just granted an outright amnesty. No one's denying that 1986 was amnesty. In fact, the White House is using that as a talking point in their favor to differentiate between what's happening in 2007. But according to Meese, there's just that's just not the case. I mean, he sees this as an amnesty, and the fact that you have these new Z visas that are created. It's a problem, and I think it's something that needs to be dealt with. But I think what one idea that I've actually heard floated about today, Conn, was taking different pieces of the bill at a different time. So, for instance, maybe if the Senate dealt with the border security, the first, I believe, 3 titles of the bill in one separate measure, and then maybe perhaps went to a guest worker program in another measure, and then maybe dealt with the Z visas as part of a third measure, that's one approach to do it. You don't have them all in one bill, but maybe you do 3 separate bills.
So it sounds like you think that there might actually be a possibility for some work on an immigration bill.
Well, based on the fact that the White House is not letting this go, and I don't think that Senator Ted Kennedy wants this to go either. I mean, he's invested a lot of time in this. You have to keep in mind that this has been an issue that Kennedy's worked on since he came to the Senate. So, the forces that are driving this are not giving up on it. I think what Harry Reid did yesterday in terms of shelving the bill temporarily was a way to hand President Bush a defeat. I mean, he said so on the floor. He said the headline should be that the president fails again. So it was a political move on Reid's part, and I really I think that if there's another option on the table, and if the White House is willing to at least talk to conservatives this time, maybe we could get something done. But by having a backroom deal, no committee hearings, not allowing more than a couple dozen amendments on the floor, that's just not the way that the Senate does business, and not the way we should be legislating.
So what are some elements? Can you name 3 elements that are musts that would have to happen before Heritage approved of a Senate immigration bill?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to...
What would Rob Bluey like to see? 3 elements before Rob Bluey signed on.
Right, exactly. Well, first of all, I think, as Duncan Hunter made clear in the debate this week, there has to be progress on building the border fence, and we just haven't seen that at this point. I think the White House has, for whatever reason, dragged its feet on that. They never seem enthusiastic about doing it, so that has to be a priority.
So what does that look like in a bill? You say we have to see progress into it, but would it be, the CBO has to sign off that immigration has decreased by 50% before anything happens, or X miles of fence have to be actually laid, or, X number of border agents have to be, hired and working? What kind of, measures are you looking for here?
Well, yeah, we have to see more than just a few miles of fence built. That's definitely one of the key things. And it's a very measurable goal to set. So, I think it's an easy way to set a target. In terms of reducing illegal aliens coming into our country. How do you do that unless you have the enforcement? And that would be a second component that I would say would be a must.
What do you mean by enforcement?
Well, enforcement in terms of going into businesses and cracking down on employers that are hiring illegal aliens. And you're not going to people are going to still come into this country if there's no crackdown on that area. And that certainly can be done. We have the laws in place that could do it, and the White House, says that they're doing it, but they're just not doing it at an effective enough rate to stem the flow of illegal immigrants.
So you think that stemming the tide is going to be more done by attacking businesses than by beefing up the border?
No, well, I think they both have to go hand in hand. I think that you have to, in addition to just building the fence, you definitely have to beef up the border patrol. You have to do some of the things that Senators John Cornyn and John Kyle, back when they were actually talking to each other and friends, we're talking about doing with some of the the planes that fly over, the virtual fence, things of this nature. We're willing to. There are some fixable things in terms of that approach that could be done. So, but you can't do it. You have to do the crackdown on the businesses. You have to build the fence. You have to do that stuff first. And that's what we're trying.
If they came up with a bill that did all that stuff, how much wiggle room would that buy people who wanted to grant citizenship to the 12 million that are already here?
That's hard to say. It's a question for the senators like Jim DeMint and Jeff Sessions.
Well, what would make you comfortable?
Well, would it make me comfortable? Certainly I would feel much more comfortable in terms of exploring a way to do that had we, put these other policies in place. Do I still like the idea of rewarding people for breaking the law? No, not at all. But I think that there's definitely a desire of the American people to do something, and what that is, that's something that we need to have hearings about. It's something that we need to have a debate in both houses of Congress.
Why do you think this is such an important issue for conservatives? Gets them fired up so much. The founder of this site, Bob Wright, God bless his soul, is very, very skeptical that immigration is a problem at all and doesn't really see what the big deal is here. How does the illegal immigration, how the 12 million, how do they help our nation in some way, and why do conservatives care?
Well, I think the factor, let's just take the rule of law. I mean, that's the number one argument that I've been hearing among conservatives over the last 3 weeks, and it's an argument that I've been making on my blog. Conservatives, if they believe about anything, it's upholding the rule of law, and the fact that people are breaking it by coming to our country illegally, skipping, and then we're talking about rewarding them, putting them ahead of people who want to come here legally. We have a problem with that.
Is there any cognitive dissonance with that argument and supporting a Scooter Libby pardon?
Well, I think it was Cato Byrne on National Review who said, it's remarkable that the president is willing to give amnesty to these lawbreakers and not to a loyal servant like Scooter Libby.
So all of a sudden Kate's in favor of the immigration compromise on Scooter Libby grounds, huh?
I guess you'd have to ask her that. I don't know.
I guess President Bush is just a really forgiving guy.
Yes.
So turning to politics, who are the biggest winners and losers from this immigration debate?
Well, I'd have to say the biggest, in terms of, let's start with presidential politics.
Oh, definitely.
I think that Duncan Hunter clearly came out of the debate with one of the best lines, and wasn't surprised to see it featured on the homepage of his campaign website the next day. When he was making the case about the need to build the border, the fact that he doesn't believe that the White House's argument that Americans won't do these jobs is a bad argument, and he was citing some examples. So I think Duncan Hunter, raised his stature. I don't know. I think Tom Tancredo may have gone a little bit overboard. I think
he announced this week he's scaling back his presidential campaign.
That's interesting, especially in light of what he said at the debate. I mean, I think that he was really put on the spot. John McCain went after him quite harshly after he made some comments about stemming the flow of immigration at all. And I guess that's another important point, just to touch back. I think there's a difference between immigrants who are coming here, between like the high-skilled immigrants who we definitely would want to encourage, versus the low-skilled immigrants. That's one of my colleague Robert Rector's argument, the enormous financial drain that they have on our government. And I think that the Tancredo argument kind of gets muddled, and there's kind of this nativist sentiment that worries some in the party. So I'd say Tancredo probably didn't help himself at all. And then finally, I mentioned John McCain, obviously, since he stood apart from all of the Republicans in the debate. He was the only one who was, pushing forward with this.
Not the only one who supported it, because Brownback did too, but he was definitely led the league in supporting it.
He definitely was the most aggressive, exactly. And McCain comes out of this, I think, probably with having more conservatives distrust him just because of his previous positions on, say, campaign finance reform, opposing the Bush tax cuts. They still remember these things.
So it fits into a larger narrative on McCain.
Exactly. And I
just
think
not trusting him on issues that matter to conservatives.
He's going to have a hard time, overcoming some of that distrust. And the fact that he dropped to fourth in at least the Rasmussen poll this week, was a sign that maybe it is having an effect.
So, turning to the debates then, since we're on 08, the one we just had on Tuesday, I was going to go through each candidate and ask you questions directly about how they did. First of all, Giuliani and social conservative issues, specifically abortion. How do you think he handled that in the debate on Tuesday?
Well, I think it was by obviously pure luck that lightning struck at the same time, and he got a lot of laughter just given the kind of setup that was on the stage when the microphone started to.
So he literally got help from God there.
He literally did, and I think that the question he was able to laugh it off and make light of that fact. So I think that definitely helped him. I mean, he's definitely improved on answering that question throughout the 3 debates. I feel that he's become more comfortable with his own position, and whether or not that's more convincing to conservatives, I'm not sure. I know, in terms of my perspective on it, I'll never agree with him on his views on social issues. But there are people out there who just see him as the most electable person and are just willing to kind of forgive him on that issue.
So outside of Giuliani depending on lightning striking every time a reporter asks him about abortion, you think that he has improved on the issue?
I actually do, yeah. I think it was the first debate where he was really kind of all over the place. When Chris Matthews was asking him the question, he seemed not sure what to say, and whether it was coaching afterwards or just giving it a lot more thought. He's definitely come around and seems to at least be more comfortable with his position and how he wants to talk about it to a very conservative audience.
Okay, moving on to Mitt Romney. Can he beat the flip-flop rap? I mean, we saw Wolf press him on first the English as the official language, and then pointing out that Romney, is running ads in Spanish. How much does that charge hurt Romney?
Well, and you even had somebody in the audience ask Romney about being a flip-flopper. So I think that this is just going to continue to be a drag on him throughout the campaign. I mean, he's done a pretty good job trying to address it. I thought his answer to the Spanish language website, was a good one.
Which was what?
Well, he basically said, why wouldn't I want to appeal to every potential voter out there? I mean, I thought it was kind of a silly question. I'm glad it was asked, but I thought Romney handled it well. He immediately said that and then moved on to talking about a larger issue. I'm not sure that in terms of Romney's how do you get past the flip-flopping, especially now that you have somebody like Fred Thompson, who's probably going to clearly enter the race, who will have the same or identical position to Romney on a lot of these issues. Why wouldn't people just go with Fred Thompson over Romney, who you may have some suspicions of his past? It's going to be tough for Mitt to get past that, and especially when you have people in the audience asking him about being a flip-flopper. I mean, that's what really hurts. You expect it from Wolf Blitzer. Right,
but it seems like the label has stuck in many conservatives' mind on the grassroots level.
It definitely has. I mean, I think what Romney needs to do is he needs to start communicating more directly with bloggers. John McCain has gotten some very favorable press because he's actually held, I think, 3 blogger calls so far. Every couple of weeks he gets on there. He's lighthearted. He jokes around.
Although it's been a while since the last one.
It has been a little while, yes. I don't think it's been 2 weeks. I think it's been a little longer.
Yeah.
I think Romney needs to do things like that. He's dispatched some of his key aides to do some of these calls, but I think he needs to get on there and just have this dialogue with people who are going to be writing about him and try to explain and get them to drop using the flip-flopper label.
Moving on to Mike Huckabee, who always gets favorable reviews from after the debates. Everyone loves his one-liners. Redstate's Eric Erickson said he was a hands-down winner of Tuesday's debate. Is he going to break into the top tier or not?
I think it's going to be very hard for Huckabee to do that. You have a group like the Club for Growth, which immediately went after him. I think did some serious damage right at the start.
And what is his Club for Growth sin? I mean,
well, his Club for Growth. We could go through the list. I think that they're mad at him for first of all, raising taxes. They say he opposes school vouchers. He supports the minimum wage hike.
But which taxes did he raise? I mean, wasn't it a court-mandated highway tax or something?
Well, yeah, and Huckabee I think Huckabee actually has a pretty good explanation when he says that, and he's actually been saying that.
So then why is the club picking on him so bad?
Why is the club? Why did the club pick on Lincoln Chafee so bad and run Steve Laffey against him last year in Rhode Island? I mean, the club clearly has its targets and its concerns about people, and they have a concern about Huckabee. So,
well, help us out here, Rob. Theorize. What is their Huckabee issue?
Well, I think that a big factor, just like they're picking on John McCain and don't like John McCain. I think that once you've taken a position on an issue. In McCain's case, he opposed those Bush tax cuts, and the club is never going to forgive him for that. In Huckabee's case, it's that he raised this tax because whether the court imposed it or not, he was the governor at the time, and there's a concern that if he gets elected into the White House, that he will do the same thing.
So is it an issue of once the club has challenged you on something and you go against them, they'll hate you forever?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say the club's not forgiving ever, but...
Well, not as forgiving as George Bush.
Right, exactly. But, I mean, the larger issue, I think, with Huckabee is that he needs to, if he's going to break into this next tier, he has to distinguish himself from Sam Brownback, at least among the social conservatives. I think he is starting to do that. Brownback's not going to win many fans by sticking with McCain on this immigration bill.
No.
So Huckabee obviously has one opportunity there, and I think he has an opportunity because he's this genuinely funny guy who can generate some laughs, and in the last debate he was joking there obviously about how he was getting all the moral questions, and I thought that was a great line for him to use.
So finally, let's move on to McCain here. We already mentioned that he's toned down his blogger conference calls. He's losing county chairs in South Carolina over immigration. He's losing staff and lawyers to Fred Thompson. Every indication is that his second quarter fundraising is going to be terrible. Can McCain turn this around? Is McCain's candidacy over?
Well, I would hate to declare it over, but I mean it's only going to get tougher. There are people who say that Fred Thompson would actually help McCain. I think that the fact that, as you indicated, he's losing this fundraiser and lawyer to Fred Thompson is an indication that maybe because they are similar in some ways, at least in terms of their straight talk. And
Reform Washington kind of message.
Yeah, exactly. That Fred Thompson will actually hurt McCain and could ultimately be McCain's undoing. I just don't really get it with the McCain campaign. They seem to have the organization in place. I mean, they have this flashy website. They have the money to produce these great looking videos. But it just doesn't seem like the message is resonating with voters, at least the way that it did in 2000. And can't help but think that it was there's still some hard feelings from that run against George Bush back in like South Carolina and New Hampshire that has some people turned off about McCain, at least among the conservatives. But also these positions he's taken over the last 7 years during the Bush administration. Even if it's a thing like the torture issue, where McCain has differentiated himself from conservatives who want to go tough on terrorists. I mean, a small issue like that, you'd be surprised, really sticks in people's minds.
Well, I don't think it also ever helps when you call the people who you're asking for votes racists, which is pretty much what he does with the immigration debate.
That's true. And that's also a reason that, Bush, when he went down to Georgia last week and gave a speech talking about, making a plea to pass this immigration bill, I think that was his problem. That the temper came out a little bit, clearly frustrated with conservatives. That's no way to treat the people that have voted for you, given you money, supported you, throughout your tenure, with the exception of a few minor issues maybe. But it's a turnoff, and I think McCain may have that same problem.
So we've been flirting around the topic, but Fred Thompson, real candidate, splash in the pan?
Well, I think he definitely is a real candidate. I mean, the fact that you look at some of the people that he's pulling together for his team, the website launched this week, I'mWithFred.com. Well, it was just kind of a primitive website, didn't have much content to it, but it was at least a way to raise some money. And
he's gotten some big gets staff-wise for his line so far.
He definitely has. I think he's clearly serious. I think that it'll be interesting to watch the defections. I don't think McCain's the only person that's going to be hurt by this. I think that there will be people, and it probably already have, with Romney's campaign who leave. I'm not so sure so much about Giuliani, but you'll recall that there was this kind of race earlier this year between Romney and McCain for supporters among the House Republicans and I guess to a lesser extent Senate Republicans.
Right, and the same thing happened in South Carolina and Iowa. They go to the delegations. They try to sign up as many members as they can.
Right, and I think the people who held off were probably very wise in doing so. Considering that you have a new entrant into the field, and the dynamics are going to change. And I just wonder how many people are going to peel off and go to Fred Thompson, who made previous commitments.
So on his new web team, I know he's got Bush Cheney, 04E campaign director, Matt Turk on board, and then he's also got John Hinkey, who helped out George Allen here in Virginia, not terribly effectively, and who's been with Mitch McConnell. Can Thompson? What kind of is he trying to be the next Howard Dean here? What is his, online fetish, if you will?
Well, I think that Fred's been able to, he's seen the type of impact that the web can have.
Give me an example.
Well, let's look back to his first post, which I believe was on Redstate, and it generated just a tremendous amount of buzz.
It crashed Redstate twice.
It did crash Redstate twice, and I think his second post on Redstate was actually when he disclosed that he had cancer, or was in remission. And that was actually picked up by the Drudge Report. I mean, and for the Drudge Report to even link to a blog is surprising. So, and again, crashed Redstate. And now you see him everywhere. I mean, he's got National Review columns. He's on Town Hall. He's still doing a few things here and there on Redstate.
Paul Harvey radio commentary.
Yeah, Paul Harvey radio commentaries. So, I mean, he's doing these things without having to spend a lot of money on them, and I think that he's seen that they're effective. And it's at least a way for him to go out and do something where you don't have to spend big bucks on consultants, and even though now that he is starting to delve into that world, I think you're going to continue to see him use the web as a way to not only raise money but probably generate votes.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's had the complete kind of free media blitz that you've kind of outlined. He hasn't spent a cent on ads or a dollar for a bus in Iowa, etc. He's already moved up the polls in Florida, New Hampshire, even Iowa. But what kind of confidence do you have that will turn into people, voting on Titanic Tuesday or whatever we're calling February 5th these days?
Well, I think the one concern that the Thompson campaign needs to have is that really, I don't think voters know a whole lot about where he stands on all the issues. I don't think there's really been a clear understanding.
Is that helping him or hurting him right now?
Well, I think it's probably helping him at this point. For instance, they know the fact that he was, virtually identical to John McCain on campaign finance reform. Now, he has expressed some reservations since then, but at the time, they were right there. As McCain indicated, I think, in his last blogger conference call, Fred he made it seem like Fred Thompson would have been on the same page on immigration, and now Fred Thompson obviously is kind of taking a different tactic on that. So,
do you think there are going to be any Romney-type flip-flop charges he's going to hit with?
That's exactly what I'm getting at. I think that these campaigns are probably going through their opposition research right now and trying to figure out how exactly they want to attack Fred Thompson. You probably won't see any of that right away. I mean, he has to officially declare and become one of them before you start to see the attacks released. Whether it's directly or indirectly through the press and through blogs.
I was about to say, I think you're going to be getting a bunch of those emails.
Yeah, I've officially resigned from doing any of that, Con. I'm happy to have left that.
You're no longer a hitman,
I left human events.
So, I mean, do you think he's going to be able to survive that onslaught?
Well, I think that depends on how effective his messaging is on the web. Obviously, you mentioned John Hinkey coming aboard. Hinkey, if anybody had to deal with a negative political environment, it was him when he was with George Allen. Now, I mean, he came in after Macaca, so there was only so much he could do at that point. But still, he had some other little fires he had to put out throughout the rest of that campaign. I think Mike Turk, clearly understands what it takes to win. I mean, he's been with Bush Cheney and the RNC when they had a good year in 2004, and those are people who at least have the experience. Now, the web's not going to be the only thing, though. I mean, you're going to have a full-scale media team to rebut this. And it'll be interesting to see if Fred Thompson kind of takes the approach that he did with Michael Moore, where he, kicks up his legs and puffs on a cigar, or whether he engages in a serious, direct response to some of these allegations that are inevitably going to come out against him.
So, speaking of Hinkie, I know when he signed on with Fred, James Joyner outside the Beltway said, he really hopes that Thompson's able to use him better than Mitch McConnell did, who pretty much, had him spoon-feeding mass emails to bloggers. And James Joyner's point was basically that, Mitch McConnell wasn't used effectively. What do you really think that the GOP needs to be doing more of online? And this is kind of getting into a post you had that sparked a wide-ranging debate about how far behind the GOP is online.
Yeah, I think that Hinkie's frustration, and I could sense it, working on Capitol Hill, he was only, a 5-minute walk away, so we'd see each other quite often. One of the things that he was never able to do even was start a blog. He wanted to start a blog where you could kind of message what Senate Republicans were doing. And just the limitations there, I think, were a real impediment to his being effective.
Well, why? What were the limitations? On the House side, the Speaker's office, Nancy's office, has the gavel. It gets, when they're on message and the Iraq vote's going around, they get a lot of hits on lefty blogs, and they become part of the environment. What were the barriers he was facing in order to get his blog up and running for the GOP Senate?
Well, as I understood it, the biggest barrier was, I think the House rules are a little bit more flexible in terms of people having blogs up because, as you know, you have like Mike Pence and Jack Kingston and the Republican Study Committee. You have it just seems like there's a lot more blogs that are being utilized by House members.
So what kind of just arcane Senate rules? What are we talking about here?
That's what I understood from Hinkie, that it was basically these arcane rules, or if it wasn't that, it's not like they could just take WordPress or Movable Type or one of these out-of-the-box blogging packages and just plug it in. They actually had to build something. They had to use something that was previously designed by the Senate staff. So, there was just a lot of
technical issues as well.
Had to go through.
There were a lot of technical issues as well as whatever Senate rules were.
Right,
in the process.
Right, and I also think that while I give Mitch McConnell a lot of credit for hiring Hinkie and bringing a blogger on staff, I just wonder necessarily. McConnell. I've talked to the guy before. He doesn't necessarily seem like he's the type that would sit down and blog himself. So I really think that that's the difference between, say, a Mike Pence or a Jack Kingston.
But you don't see Nancy blogging at the gavel.
Well, that's true, but I think she's. I think that's one of the. You asked about the differences between liberals and conservatives here online, and I think that's one of the differences that liberals are a little bit more willing to delegate the message to staff, and conservatives and Republicans are much more scripted. They always have been, and they're much more controlling of what goes out.
Well, going back to your GOP getting their butt kicked online. You cite some stats. In the first quarter, I think for 08, the Democratic 08 candidates have raised $15 million online, and the Republican total is so small that they never even released it, or were slow to at the beginning. And then in 06, the Act Blue and the Netroots were able to raise $4 million online. It's only $300,000 by the conservatives. What's going on here? We're talking, scales of factors of 10 here.
Well, the first point that I always make is that it's always easier to have success, I think, when you're in the minority and you're trying to gain power. So, there's just much more of a desire to either give money, to get out the vote, and especially in an environment where Republicans were just so down. You were just coming off the Mark Foley thing, you had all Duke Cunningham scandal.
So it's not that, they were in the minority, it's just that Mark Foley scandal, Iraq, it was just a bad environment for Republicans.
It was a bad environment, and you had people, since I was one of the, founding Right Roots people, bloggers, I heard from people, why would I want to give money to any of these guys? Even though you were giving to a direct candidate, there was still a perception that you were feeding the beast and one that really wasn't listening to the base. So I think that's one factor. I think another thing is that Democrats and liberals just were much more inclined to advance to put forward the tools that made it possible.
So why is the internet so special in that regard? I mean, the GOP adapted direct mailing first. The GOP utilized talk radio better. The GOP did a better job innovating and targeting through cable television, and Democrats still use broadcast all the time. What's so special about the internet that the GOP can't figure this technology out?
I don't necessarily know if they can't figure it out. I just don't think that there's really. You would really need to have somebody like, say, a Mike Turk, quit his day job and invest in a business like an Act Blue on the right, and I don't think we've seen anybody do that. Now, I'm not sure why. I mean, it would seem like there's a void right now, and you could, if you're an enterprising young conservative web person, you could certainly strike it rich by doing that.
Well, aren't you an enterprising young conservative web person?
What's that?
Aren't you a young, enterprising, conservative web person?
Yeah, I definitely am.
So why don't you strike it rich?
Well, I enjoy my job at the Heritage Foundation.
Heritage is just that awesome, huh?
It is. But no, I mean, I'm serious. Like, I think that, I'll just throw out the name David Ahl, who used to be Jack Kingston's web guru and now has his own company. I mean, I think that somebody like David, if given the resources, meaning the financial resources.
But, Marcos didn't need resources. Marcos built Daily Kos by himself. He didn't have any angel investors or anything like that.
Oh, that's a perfectly good point. It's frustrating that it was, and in fact, when Right Roots and ABC PAC came into existence, it really came into existence because of the Donatellis and Campaign Solutions, and I know Turk was actually involved in that and some of the creation of it. So, you even had like a kind of a bigger online firm, putting the pieces together, not an enterprising young grassroots person. It's definitely a factor that there's just not the mechanism right now, and I'm shocked that one hasn't been built. I mean, here we are in June of 2007. We're 6 months into the year, and we're still awaiting somebody to unveil this for the right. Meanwhile, Act Blue is continuing to raise millions of dollars.
So, why isn't this? I mean, Act Blue is kind of a separate entity from the Democratic Party. It's new. It's not something that sprung out of the nation or came out of the Brookings Institution. But when you look at the conservative blogosphere, you have the stalwarts like The Corner, which is coming out of National Review. You have The Right Angle, which you created out of the Human Events, which has been around forever. You have Town Hall, which is the face of Salem Radio, which is conservative talk radio. You have the online right, a lot of the stalwarts of it, emanating from in an existing conservative framework that is not geared towards activism, not geared towards raising money. Whereas on the left you have an entity rising by itself, frustrated with their party, starting out on their own, forging as their identity this activism which involves raising money, which involves calling Congress people, etc. Do you think this is a fair assessment? And if so, how do you think conservatives can break away from their existing infrastructure, or do you think that infrastructure needs to change?
Well, no, I think it is. I think it is a fair assessment. It definitely is. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the popular sites on the right are what you mentioned. I mean, whether it's National Review or Salem or Human Events or Town Hall. I mean, it's that's where people are going for their information. Now, I don't think that. I think in some cases, like Town Hall, I mean, they actually do have an action center where you can go and do things, at least on a policy level, in terms of trying to affect the debate. And they'll give you the phone numbers of offices.
Yeah, but not immigration, because if people want to affect the debate over immigration, Dean Barnett is going to get all mad at you and ask you to stop.
Right, exactly. Well, and Dean was actually the one who sparked this outrage of mine, if you want to call it that, when he said he's just not even interested in hearing about the action alerts and doesn't want to get those.
Do you want to fill everyone in on what exactly happened there and was the backstory?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, this goes back to Redstate's quest and campaign against House Republicans. I know you had Eric Erickson on a couple weeks back.
Right, talking about Ken Calvert.
Yes, and Ken Calvert, a Republican House member who he wanted to see ousted from the House Appropriations Committee. And, Eric took a very aggressive approach. I mean, he was calling this a war against the House Republicans. He had a daily message, a daily alert to call this office, call that office, tell Tom Cole that you're not sending any money to the Congressional Committee, et cetera, et cetera. And Dean Barnett came on and said, this is the wrong approach. First of all, you're being way too aggressive with this. And second of all, I just don't want to have these action alerts. James Joyner at Outside the Beltway, not on this issue, but on another issue, pretty much said the same thing. And it frustrated me because I thought, well, here you have two leading voices who are in a position to actually
help out.
Inspire the base, tell the grassroots the way they can help and contribute. And they're not willing to do so.
So you have Salem, you have the talk radio entity being part of the problem.
I wouldn't label it. I mean, Dean Barnett is just one blogger in the entire Salem network. So I mean,
fair enough.
Yeah. So I mean, he's not dictating the policy.
No.
And I think the fact that
they provided the platform for his voice.
They did provide the platform for his voice, but at the same time, you have Mary Catherine Ham, who was actually one of the co-founders of the Right Roots movement, back in '06 in terms of raising
It's not
money.
like she took Dean Barnett on the issue, though.
No, in fact, Dean Barnett's colleagues, his co-bloggers over at Town Hall, one of them, anyways, Matt Lewis, challenged me and said I was misguided for attacking Dean Barnett. And that prompted another reaction from another Town Hall blogger, Patrick Ruffini, who used to be with the RNC
and now used to be with Giuliani.
And now used to be with Giuliani. So I mean, Patrick obviously has an interest in activism. Just given his previous positions, his previous jobs. So it did inspire quite a lot of debate, and I think it's a healthy debate to have. I think looking ahead though, what we need to do, I think the immigration battle, for instance, was a good example of how you kind of brought these conservative bloggers together, even more so than when you had the Harriet Miger's brouhaha when she got knocked off her Supreme Court nomination, because even in that case you had some conservative bloggers who were defending her in the White House. But on immigration, pretty much universally,
pretty unanimous.
Unless you were a McCain supporter, you were pretty much against this bill. So it was a very unifying theme for conservative bloggers.
So, I mean, do you think that they'll be able to build off this? I mean, this is something, Is it a Lamont type moment where they can say, okay, we affected a legislation here, or is it going to be undercut by something like Calvert where they say, look, we can't even get our party to put the right people on appropriations, but part of the reason even McCain says part of the reason they lost in '06 is because they were seen as big spenders, corrupt, and here you have Ken Calvert enforcing that message. Do you think the immigration victory is being overshadowed by the Ken Calvert losses of the world?
Yeah, I think that just to go back and to wrap up the Calvert thing, I think the issue there was that maybe it was just a too niche of an issue. I mean,
too obscure.
For instance, how many people had even heard of Ken Calvert? I mean, I'm intricately involved in what goes on in Congress, and I didn't know anything about the guy before Eric started this war against him. So I think that was perhaps an issue.
A bridge too far.
That wasn't necessarily a good way to judge the activist nature of the right online. But I think the immigration debate is, and I think that what you saw was a willingness of big-name bloggers like Hugh Hewitt. I mean, look at Michelle Malkin. Her website, as they were voting on cloture and the final bill, she was live blogging the debate on the Senate floor. I mean, that's just remarkable that you'd have somebody of her stature willing to do that minute-by-minute, blow-by-blow. I just thought that was great. So whether you're just Joe Smith blogging your thoughts on immigration, or whether you go all the way up to the top tiers of the Republican blogosphere, conservative blogosphere, you definitely had unity on this issue. Now, that being said, It's not like we're raising money, though. I mean, it's not like conservatives are raising money off of this yet. And how do you translate the activism that took place on this policy issue into a political campaign, for instance? I'm not sure anyone has figured out how to do that yet, and I'm not sure immigration really teaches us how to do that.
So I got one last question for you. I don't know if you saw Patrick Buffini's post from last week or the week before, but he was looking at the blog ad survey data, and he came up with a new theory on why the GOP is behind online. And basically, he found that conservatives were twice as likely to have 3 kids, 3 times as likely to have 4 kids, and that liberals who read blogs were 40% more likely to live alone than conservatives who had a family. And his main thesis was then that the big reason why GOPers are behind online is because they have families and kids that suck up time that liberals basically don't.
Yeah, I didn't actually get a chance to comment yet on Patrick's post, but I think he's right on the money. I can tell you a story about one guy I ran into a couple weeks ago who was asking me how he could do more online and get involved, and I was suggesting, first thing you should do is start a blog and, start communicating with other bloggers. And he just kept coming back to the same point. I don't have time. I don't have time. And I said, what do you mean you don't have time? It's easy for me to say. I'm married, but I don't have any kids yet, and I go home at night and I can sit in front of the computer, and things I didn't get done during the day, I can blog about at night. But yeah, I mean, it's a serious concern. I think that when you have a family, when you have kids, you're going on vacations, you're putting them to bed, you're reading to them, your time is preoccupied with other things, and the blog ad survey was certainly. Certainly demonstrated that there is a disparity. There's a difference between who these people are and why you may not have the type of impact on the right that you do on the left. So I give Patrick credit for certainly pointing that out. I don't necessarily know if there's a way to correct that. I also think
it's called abstinence for
GOPers.
It's the abstinence-only solution.
Let me just say this, Conn, though. I think that blogging isn't necessarily the only way to do that. I think there's many different components to being engaged online. I know, but
the blog ad survey was about online readership. The people that are reading the blogs.
But like, for instance, this guy that I was talking to, we ended up settling our differences by telling. I was telling him how he could just as effectively email people, 50 of his friends. Or forward messages, based on the different,
Oh no! Don't advise him to forward stuff, please. Let's not do that. No more forwards.
No more forwards. Okay, I won't recommend that.
Okay. So to close out here, we have a promise from you to abstain from having children, so you can better support the GOP online effort.
Well, I don't know if Mrs. Bluey would like that too much.
Okay.
So I can't make that promise without talking to her first.
Well, then I guess we don't have committed for you on that. We'll end it there, Rob. Great talking to you.
Thanks, Conn. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.